All right, so we're going to be making a cream of broccoli cheddar soup, and what you'll see here is the mise en place for that, not including the velouté sauce, which we have warm on the stove. Because we've done so much work with that velouté sauce, a lot of the work is done for us as far as making this soup, because we're choosing to use that chicken velouté as a base for this soup. So I'm just going to be working on the knife cuts. First, I'm going to go after this broccoli. So with broccoli, sometimes it can come with a much longer stem, and if you do have that long stem, I would say, even though you will likely want to trim it, that is all edible trim. The only thing that I would say is inedible is just that little edge. Might as well just shave off that little edge. It's compostable trim right there. And then you can see that broccoli is consisting kind of a bunch of different florets, they're called, and so I usually like to kind of release those florets with the knife. I'm going to grab my paring knife for that, and it's a little bit easier to kind of pull it into individual florets. And if I get a big bottom like that, chop that off. Definitely going to want to be separating any stemmy pieces that I have from florets. And then I'm going to be breaking these down even further. A couple different bowls. And first what I'm going to do is just trim the stems, because the stems and the florets themselves are going to cook at different rates. I could take all this and steam it, but when you steam something, you actually do lose quite a lot of nutrients and some of the color too, the flavor. So I'm going to choose a different technique, and so I'm going to break it down into really small florets. And again, those florets are going to cook at different rates than the stems, which is why it's important to separate them. Florets into a bowl, the larger bowl because there's more. I really don't want to waste any piece of this yummy floret, and so I'm going to wipe my board directly into my bowl. That's going to flavor my soup really nice. Okay, set my florets aside. Next, I'm going to start working on this. And with this, sometimes the outer edges can be a little woody and fibrous. This is really not that woody at all, so I think I can get away with just minimally trimming these guys and then finely chopping them. And I'm going to get a ton of broccoli flavor. Not a ton of color, but a ton of flavor. Even with that, it doesn't seem so fibrous that I can't just finely mince this. And the idea is you want it super, super thin so that it'll really just melt down as it sweats. It's almost going to lend a creamy texture to the soup without adding cream. Not all creamy soups have just cream as the base. Usually with a creamy soup, if there is cream in it at all, it's just a little bit at the finish. But it's about how you treat the vegetables in order to coax out that creamy texture, that creamy mouthfeel. And part of that is slicing them nice and thin. Slicing this broccoli nice and thin. This one is slightly more fibrous. I am going to trim those outer Hungry, Chef? Don't worry, I'll make you some soup. I find the finer you mince this part, the more flavor you can extract. Just as easily use a chef knife for this job, or like my vegetable cutter. When you're prepping, make sure it stays nice and clean, nice and tight. Okay, we have our broccoli florets, our broccoli stems. The last thing that we're going to be working on is just a little bit of finely grated carrot. Just want to keep it on a medium grate. You could just as easily use your microplane from your knife kit. Not a ton of carrot, just a little bit, add a little color. A tiny bit of sweetness. I think that's good. Just a little. And we also have some finely sliced leeks. Some beautiful finely sliced leeks. Okay, so we have our mise en place ready for our cream of broccoli cheddar soup. Bring it over to the range. I'm using my Dutch oven. I think you could use really a pot just like this for your soup. Anything will do. It's nice to have a lid for sure. I'm going to begin by adding a little bit of butter, a small amount of olive oil, very small olive oil. I want to make sure that butter melts down before I add any of the other ingredients. I am going to add my leeks first because I do want to get them cooking down just a touch. Make sure they're softened before I add my broccoli. The broccoli I want to cook until it's just softened because it's very important to maintain that nice bright green color. And then eventually we're going to take that broccoli and put it into our velouté sauce, and it's going to finish cooking in there. And so we're looking to just really take the initial bite off of it, cook it to about al dente. At the point where I'm ready to add the leeks, a little bit of finely diced celery, leeks, and those finely diced stems as well. Minced stems. You want to make sure that there's enough fat so that everything is coated, but it's not like swimming in cooking fat. This is a creamy soup, and so it is a little bit different. You want to have a little bit, it's okay if you have a little bit more fat in your pan because it's not going to rise to the top. Really soak that fat in. Put a lid on it and let it sweat for a few minutes. Alright, so the air has been sweating. I'm going to add that little bit of grated carrot, some finely minced garlic, and a pinch of crushed red pepper flake. I like spice. You could omit the crushed red pepper flake if you don't like spice. You can make it a little bit smaller pinch if you're just like spice a little bit. Just toasting that garlic slightly. Toast, I don't mean caramelize. Really, we're trying to keep the caramelization to a minimum with this because we want to preserve the nice bright green colors. I'm going to add our broccoli. Getting a nice fragrance from that toasting garlic. A little more olive oil. I'm stirring it so that all of the ingredients combine and so that they're all kind of getting toasted a little bit. Now, because I want to also, this is sauteed, but we're also kind of looking to steam this broccoli because broccoli takes a little bit of time to cook. What I'm going to do is add just a tiny bit of chicken stock. And I'm going to put a lid on this and I heat down to medium. And what's going to happen is by the time that liquid has reduced enough and evaporated, the broccoli will be fully cooked. We won't want to just walk away from this pot. This is going to happen relatively quickly. We want to make sure that we catch that broccoli so that it's still holding its shape but cooked through and nice and bright green. Our broccoli is just starting to cook through. I would not say it's fully cooked, which is where we want it. We're going to now add our velouté sauce. And if the thickness is too much, we can always add more liquid. We're going to add a little bit of cream, but I think we're right where we want to be. And what we're going to do now is let this simmer. I'm going to add just a small pinch of salt. Small pinch of pepper. Turn my heat down. I don't need a boil, just a gentle simmer. so that we can fully cook that broccoli. If it starts to break down, that's okay. If it gets too thick, we can add a little bit of water, we can add a little stock, depends on what it tastes like. If it's too salty, if maybe you got a little crazy with your base, then add water. It'll thin it out a touch, mellow out that flavor. But really we're just looking to cook it and simmer it for just a little while, probably 2 or 3 minutes until that broccoli is starting to break down. Okay, so now I'm going to be making the garnish for my cream of broccoli cheddar soup. And everything bagel crisp. And so I have just a regular bagel. Actually, I think this is an everything bagel. Sliced super, super thin. I like to keep them kind of part frozen, and then it's easy to slice them nice and thin. You could just as easily do this with some white bread and turn it into a everything crostini or crouton. I kind of like a bagel crisp with a creamy soup. I just have a little bit of melted down butter. I'm pretty generous with the butter. You don't have to be as generous, but really with a crouton and a crostini, the more generous you are with the butter, the better it's going to taste and the better it's going to look. And if it breaks, it's not the end of the world because I'm going to end up breaking it up anyways. I'm not putting one whole big bagel crisp on my bowl. I'm just going to break it up into pieces regardless. So don't stress if your bagel crisp breaks. And a little bit of everything bagel spice. Sesame seeds, onion powder, garlic powder, poppy seeds. So good. A little salt. It's going to give a nice contrast as far as what it looks like as a garnish on our soup too. Don't be afraid to be generous with that as well. Maybe just a little bit of salt extra for some extra good measure. And why not just a little olive oil too. Pop it into a 375-degree oven until it gets golden and crispy. Shouldn't take long. Let's check back with our soup, which is simmering. It's coming along really nice over here. Definitely going to start kind of using my wooden spoon to break this up. And this is where it depends on what you have in your kitchen. You know, if you have something like an immersion blender, a wand blender, or even more intense blender, you could blend this smooth if you wanted to. I prefer to have my cream of broccoli soup a little more rustic. So I'm not really concerned about blending it completely. I'm just going to use my spoon to break the pieces up. It's not finished at this point yet. I am going to be adding some seasoning ingredients, some things that'll thicken it up, so it's very likely I'll be adding a little bit more stock or maybe even water depending on what it tastes like. I haven't tasted it in a few minutes, which I think I will do now. Good, not too salty. At the point now where the broccoli is really nice and starting to break down. You could potentially, if you didn't want to make an everything bagel crisp, you could take out just a few pieces of the larger florets and save them as a garnish, put them on the side, and then when you're ready to plate you can have kind of that pronounced dark green color. In fact, I believe I'll do that. Break it up a little bit. If I wanted to use an immersion blender, I could just pulse it and break them up a little bit more. It depends on what you're going for. Obviously, the smoother it gets, the more refined it's going to look. I prefer rustic. It is starting to get thick enough where when I move a spoon through it, you can see the bottom of the pan, which means it's getting a little bit closer to a stew than a soup. So I have to add a little bit of liquid. Because the salt is almost right where I want it to be, and I'm going to be adding cheddar, which is very salty, I'm just going to add a touch of water to this. And turn my heat up. It's on high. I'll probably bring it back down to medium high. want to get it at a nice simmer now. Okay. Add a touch of warm cream. Not too much. We don't need too much. It's quite creamy, as you can see already, without even adding any cream. Now you can kind of see the benefit of adding those little grated carrots. Those little flecks of orange are really pretty, also very tasty. You can add some grated cheddar cheese as well. It's likely I'll have to add a little bit more water again, which is okay. Turn my heat down to medium. Now we're starting to get some really nice creamy consistency. I don't think I do need to add any liquid. I think it's just where we want a nice cream soup to be. Let's give it a taste. A fresh spoon. Okay, I'm going to add just another pinch of black pepper because I'm a black pepper fiend. Pinch of salt. And we're done. Ready to plate. Okay, let's check these everything bagel crisps out. Give the pan a spin. Always making sure not to fill so much that it's going to go all the way to the brim. Wiping any edges. I always like a little drizzle of good olive oil over the top. And then there's the pieces. Bagel crisp. There we go. Cream of broccoli cheddar soup with everything bagel crisp.